Welcome to the Aligned and Amplified podcast, where we sit down with entrepreneurs, consultants, coaches, and business leaders to explore what's actually working in business today. Each episode pulls back the curtain on the strategies, lessons, challenges, and breakthroughs that shape successful businesses, helping you gain insights you can apply to your own journey. I'm your host, Jaime Ellithorpe, founder of 540 Strategies. Today, I'm joined by Lauren Wallace-Stahl, and I'm excited to dive into her story, what she's building, and the lessons that she's learned along the way. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thanks for having me, Jamie. So glad to be
Abs-
here.
Absolutely. Well, let's kick this off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, and who you help.
Okay, well, I am a somatic practitioner and I help women who have come from dysfunctional families or a challenging upbringing. And I help them in their adult lives because what I found is that when we have suppressed emotions from our early years, we create patterns in our adult life that are really challenging. And so I help them, number one, regulate the nervous system because what I have found is that that's the first place that we have to work. A lot of these people get chronically stressed in their body and they don't know how to relax. And so that doesn't, of course, we're in a culture where that is amplified by 10, right? With our busyness and just culturally everything that we have on our plates today. So, back to the regulation is first, and then we work on release and reconnecting with parts that we may have locked away or um, suppressed. We'll say suppressed. And then we reclaim and we rise, right? We reconnect to our self-worth and our identity from a place that is not outside of ourselves, as we would with being a child in a challenging situation. So that is generally who I help and how I help them.
Very interesting. So, what originally inspired you to get into this line of work?
Um, well, it's been a process. It's been a real big process, and it stems from my own journey myself. And so I was a child who I've come through battling and now on the other side of complex PTSD, which is extremely challenging to work with. And if your viewers don't know, that is usually when we think of PTSD, we think of something in the war, something happened, and that's acute. That's happened one time. But when it's chronic, that means that it's over time, right? And so my household was a traumatic situation. And so learning to calm my nervous system and regulate myself and tell myself that I was safe as an adult was really, really important. Working through my own triggers. And a lot of times, what I find is that people work with their triggers, but they don't actually heal what's here, so they keep coming. And and so what I found something really interesting. I was in the medical profession and I left in 2020. And I went down this deep dive with women and codependency, dysfunctional relationships is another way that this shows up. And what I found was one thing was leading to the next, and the women that I was working with would get stuck in their heads. So I thought, well, I mean, this isn't really helping. They're just regurgitating a story. And so I went down this rabbit hole and found somatics and Peter Levine's work. And what I found was that when we drop into the body, the energy of the heart, number one, in traditional talk therapy, everything's done through the mind, but we can also get trapped in the mind. So when we move down to the body and we actually address and curious about the energies within the body and the stories and the memories that are held there, what I found was if they could connect with the emotional parts. This is really important. The emotional parts that were suppressed at that time and release them, then the pattern would dissipate. The pattern would disappear. And I dove headfirst into that work and got certified and have been doing that for quite a long time. And what I found is really amazing. It's kind of like each one of these sessions and each time we allow ourselves to release, the pattern dissipates. And it's almost like peeling an onion. It's like little by little. The fear, the control, the things that we were using to protect ourselves start to dissipate. And we become more centered in who we are. We become a little more vulnerable and open to life. We allow change a little bit easier, which is something that anybody that's been through a challenging past has issues with. Because change means vulnerability and the unknown and the unexpected. So, when I'm doing this work, what I found in myself and in the people that I work with is it's a slow process, but it's kind of like peeling an onion. And it really is a healing journey, you know. And then a lot of the women that I work with and the people that I work with are very self-aware. A lot of them have been in therapy for many years. They know their patterns, they know their past, they know how it all works, they know how everything fits together, but the patterns haven't changed, right? It hasn't actually dissipated. So we can have the awareness and it not unlock in the body. So all of my work, somatic, soma means body. So all of my work is body based in that way to drop out of the mind and into the body where we can actually integrate those parts together. So healing means to be whole. It means to reconnect as whole, right? So trauma can fragment us into parts. And so when we integrate those back together, it's a healing process and brings us back to wholeness.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like very interesting work, to say the least. I'm curious about, from the business aspect of things, as you've been working with clients and also on your own learning journey and building your business, what are one or two milestones that you could share with us that you're really proud of since you started this work?
Well, I think being an entrepreneur at all is challenging, but it also allows us to be more resourceful and really dig deep into what matters. So it's definitely, I've had some serious pivots along the way. I think we all have. But I have stayed true to this foundation that I'm really passionate about. And I think for any entrepreneur, that's really something that is an achievement because you've got to really want it to stay and to dig in and to continue day after day when things are challenging, you get knocked down multiple times. There's a lot of instances where you can quit. So for me, being an entrepreneur for the last 6 years, it's about consistency and not giving up, you know.
Yeah, I love that. That's some really profound advice, because I think at certain periods of time we can all say that we've almost wanted to throw in the towel, but it is that persistent. So, kind of in that spirit of things, I'd love to hear more about what you feel like you've really figured out when it comes to growing your business and serving your clients.
Well, one big realization and change in my business is that entrepreneurs need offers. We need the offers to be able to give to the public that resonates with our message, a place to start and a place to continue. We need a roadmap of where we're going and how we can help them in a continuous format. And so systems have been really instrumental, and the creativity behind the offers that I create to serve my clients.
Yeah, I love that. So shifting gears, just talking about offers and the creativity, what has been the most surprising thing about growing your business just over the last 12 months?
The most surprising thing I honestly can tell you in general on this journey of entrepreneurship is how many hats I didn't know I needed to wear. That I I don't know if I would wish that I would have known earlier because I don't know if I would have jumped in as wholeheartedly and as naive and excited as I was to begin with. But that part is really challenging to put yourself in multiple shoes because as practitioners, entrepreneurs, coaches, whatever that specialty is that you serve, we want to do that one thing because we're so passionate about it, which is beautiful. And, but it's also a roadblock. You know, it can also be the same roadblock that you can't push through because at the beginning, you have to be able to fill all the other spots. And that's challenging, especially if it's not your strong suit, or it's not something that you have learned. You've got to learn it. There's no two ways about it. You have to learn, you have to be resourceful, you have to dig in deep. You have to count on your passion and your fire when your engine is on low.
Yeah, I totally agreed. Well, let's talk about some of the fun stuff. When it comes to your business, what do you find that's the easiest or most natural for you today?
Oh, the easiest and most natural really is me serving my clients and being in that space where I can hold space and bring awareness, insight, and still be what I call an empathetic witness for them to have their own breakthroughs. It's really, I have goosebumps right now. Even talking about it is still the most exciting part, and it's still the hat that I love to wear the most.
Yeah, I love that. So, looking more granularly at your business, what part of your business right now seems to require the most of your attention, energy, or focus?
Mm. I love that question, but it's not one I need to think on very long. It is gaining clients and bringing in that client acquisition because and this is probably true for a lot of entrepreneurs. I know that message has always been niche down, right? Get really specific. And I have done just that. And I think as you are on this journey of entrepreneurship, that naturally happens. You kind of narrow your focus and you can identify exactly who your person is. But at the same time, you have to have you have to be visual enough that people can find you, which is almost a catch 22 sometimes because you're narrowing, you're very specific, you're niching down, but at the same time, you have to be out there and visual and, talking to the general public to find the people who resonate with your message consistently.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So you talked about being visual. So let's shift over to vision. When you think about where your business is today versus where you want it to be, say 3 or 5 years from now, what feels most clear to you on that movement forward?
Mm. That's an interesting question because it changes, right? It changes for me. There are times where I think I know the answer and God laughs and it's like, oh, we're doing a 360. And so right now, and I will say that even in my own life, I've had to release control and be okay with not having the roadmap laid out. And that's true in my business and my personal life. And I think, I talk a lot about grabbing for faith and releasing fear. just in our own lives and development. And I think for me, the more I grab onto faith, the more I can't see what's in front of me. And I think it's by design, honestly, because I think that's a beautiful part that God's showing us, hey, if you trust, just walk. And I know you can't see what's in front of you, but you've got to have some trust and some faith, right? So we plan as much as we can, but sometimes it's a fine balance between having a vision, but not being so stuck on it that we can't allow God to come in and steer the ship when needed.
Yeah. Yep. I love that. And maybe you've kind of answered this next question that I was going to ask you is what feels the most uncertain to you in your business as you look into the future?
Yeah, everything. Just I can say where I am right now and what steps I'm taking and who I'm serving. I will say that, connection to the divine and God and that spiritual connection has actually become more of a presence, in myself, and therefore it's translated through the people that resonate with my message. So I do notice that. But as far as, yeah, it's every day, one step at a time.
I love the courage in that because sometimes you're right. That is what it takes to be in business is that we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring or next week, but focusing on what we're doing now is what makes all the difference. So you mentioned your message. So what are you hoping that your messaging, your content, and your visibility efforts are currently communicating about your business?
Hmm. I really I hope that my message speaks to the person who has been in therapy for a long time and still feels like I don't know where else to go. I don't know what else to do. I feel a little lost out here and I've tried all the resources that I know of.
Mhm.
And I hope my message communicates hope and another viable option for those that, maybe they're using unhealthy coping strategies and they're not happy with themselves about it. And what I would say is let's work with the body first. Let's work with the nervous system first because safety and regulation have to come before anything else. In traditional therapy, and I'll just throw this out there, traditional therapy asks for the person to be vulnerable with another person day one. And what I've learned is that's a fundamental issue. It's a fundamental flaw in the way that someone who is in protection mode looks at that. Because nobody's walking into vulnerability if they're in protection mode, right? So, in my work, it's about dropping into yourself so that you can be vulnerable with you. It's an inner journey because before we can reflect that outside and have the courage to do that outside of ourselves, we have to have the courage to do that in here. That's, a step number one. So working with the body to create safety is the most important part in my work I see. So I hope that message comes through for those that need some hope and another route to try on their healing journey.
Yeah, so I think you might have somewhat answered the question that I was going to ask you next, but let's dig a little deeper. What are the misconceptions, if any, about the work that you do that might be out in the marketplace that you could clear up for us here?
Hmm. I like that question, Jamie, because there are a lot of misconceptions. Some people just don't even know what somatic work is. And so, to that point, I'll just say that it's body-based work, but it's really scientific and working with the nervous system. And one misconception I've actually come into contact here recently, and I didn't even know that it was a misconception, was that it's energy work, which, to be honest with you, it couldn't be further from the truth we are working with emotions within the body, but emotions are real things within ourselves that we deal with every day. So I think there's this notion that if I'm not working with my mind, that it's some sort of pseudoscience and it's airy fairy and it's woo woo and it doesn't exist. So I want to challenge that. I do absolutely want to challenge that because we've come from a very patriarchal society. We're still in that so-called way of thinking where the mind is everything and the mind is what we, have been taught is the way that we heal. But actually, what I have found is that when we drop in the body and we release the emotions and the control that we've had over suppressing the emotions that take so much of our energy, that is unlocked and it's released. And it's actually 10 times easier than trying to analyze, what's wrong and where it came from, because none of that is really all that helpful. I have found, everybody's different. And of course, I would say that, this is a beautiful complement to traditional therapy if somebody's doing that. I don't want anybody to ever think that I don't find value in traditional therapy. I just hold the other side of the coin, if that makes sense. So, but I don't want to knock it in any respect. So, so I think there's a beautiful balance in using the two and utilizing both sides of the coin to create a whole presentation of how we can heal.
I love that. Beautiful. Thank you for clarifying to our audience the work that you do. So, as we start to wind down, I always love to ask guests this question. If you could go back to the beginning of the journey and give yourself a piece of advice, knowing what you know now, what would that piece of advice be?
Mm. Well, for me, I would say that I would give the advice that everything you're going through has a purpose. Just keep walking, even though you don't know where this is going. And I think I could give that same advice to myself today, and it still works because I do believe that there's a master plan for each of our lives. And sometimes when we're walking in the day to day, we can't see the overall plan. And we can get upset and down and think that, it's a lost cause and everything's so challenging. So I think keeping that overall arc of there's a bigger plan at work here that you can't see allows me to grab onto hope again and grab onto the releasing the need to be in control all the time, which can be really exhausting, you know, for us super responsible people. So that's what I would say to myself. There's a bigger plan at work.
I love it. Beautiful. Well, the next and final question is what's next for you, Lauren? Where can people connect with you and where can people learn more about your work?
Perfect. So, what's next for me and what I'm working on right now is a new offer. And it is, so I've got three pieces and I'm going to tier these out one by one. But in my regulation, I'm creating a program called the Chill Pill Method. And it is step number one. It is regulate, learning how to regulate the body. This is perfect for people that can't get out of the mind and that are overstressed. Maybe they're carrying some stuff from their past. Maybe they're using unhealthy coping strategies and they're not happy with it. But point being, they're ready to do something about it and they're ready to learn and take back their own sovereignty, work with their body and learn how to utilize techniques that I use, somatic techniques, to relax themselves before we go to the next step. So I'm working with getting clients for a beta program for that. So if anybody's interested in that, we can put my email down below. That's perfect. And I do have a resource if anybody's interested. And that is a 5 minute somatic trigger reset. I have an 8 step formula. So if anybody's dealing with triggers and they don't know how to manage that, they can utilize this. It comes with cards and everything that you can carry on yourself and refer to consistently because I know how hard it is to be out in the world and have some inner challenges going on and know where to turn. So I'll leave that link with you if anybody's interested in that.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for being a guest on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jamie, for having me.